we are going to discuss uh, investigating how challenging investigating corruption is in Africa. And to start with, I'd like Solomon Serwanja, who is now the director for the African Institute for Investigative Journalism, to talk about how hard it has been to investigate corruption in Africa, and more so Uganda, where he's based.
Mary, thank you so much for having us, and especially thank you to the organizers of the Africa Investigative Journalism Conference. So I just wanted to share with you one of the stories that I did regarding corruption. And it was just recently when the COVID-19 pandemic broke up. And I just asked, maybe just put up the slides up and maybe I'll follow. But at the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, everyone wanted a piece of money, because of the way because of the way the pandemic broke. Every institution needed money to manage the pandemic. And so what we saw is that there was an outcry during the lockdown. People want money, the number of patients having COVID increased. Basically, as you all know, every department of government wanted money. And Uganda as a country was broke. So I don't know if our slides are ready, because I wanted to okay, cool. So what we've seen with corruption is that it thrives best when there's a crisis. We know that many of the African countries so far have what I have so far described as a COVID-19 money haste. I think let's bring it back home in Kenya and in Uganda. The auditor generals of the different governments have raised red flags in who has actually not accounted for money. And yet, nothing has been done to bring the people who have swindled these funds to account, even with all those reports. And one of the stories I did, as they are putting it up, is at the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, I decided to look into the August Assembly, Parliament of Uganda. I went for the big fish. I always love going for the big fish because I think they are good to fry, and they get ready very, very quick. So I just made a small presentation about the power of collaboration while investigating corruption. But let's go to the next slide, because that's the core of this story. Next slide, please. Okay, so yeah, I did an investigation called The Eyes Have It. The Eyes Have It was an investigation that was looking at how Parliament of Uganda was stealing 10 billion shillings right before our own eyes. 10 billion of money that was which was supposedly to go out to support COVID-19 patients in different hospitals. Parliament wanted to steal 10 billion shillings off the budget. And so they did it in a very interesting way. Let's go to the next slide. And so again, that's our Parliament of Uganda that was involved in the scandal, and literally the entire house, next slide, was in support. So MPs came out and said, we also have constituents. We have to go and protect them against the pandemic. We want money. Now, please note that in the budget that was submitted to Parliament for approval, they didn't have this money. The 10 billion shillings was not there. Even, the Minister of Finance at that time presented a report and a budget that government, gives money, but the MPs were not there in that budget. Let's go to the next slide. So the Speaker, in her wisdom, and commissioners, and indeed some other members of Parliament, they sat behind closed doors and allocated the August Assembly 10 billion. So, because already the budget that was presented by the Minister of Finance to the House and was approved did not have it, they went behind closed doors and they moved an amendment onto the budget. Now remember, the budget was already scrutinized debated, and signed by the committee members. In other words, sealed and done. So after that meeting, they invited, and this is in a space of 3 hours, a lot of things happened. So they invited back the committee, and they said, they forged, literally it was just forging. They forged documents, they inserted things, it looked really shabby. And then when they went in the house, they debated, and the speaker said, I put it to the house, all those that are in support of this budget say yes, and those, I said, the ayes have it. It says, and then Parliament allocated itself 10 billion shillings out of nowhere. The reason was that they were saying they're also MPs and they're going to advocate against the spread of COVID-19. But we're in a lockdown. What were they going to use the money for? Next slide. And this scandal included some of the top boys in Ugandan government. We had the Speaker of Parliament, who was the architect of this whole corruption scandal. We had the Deputy Prime Minister of Uganda, again, one of the people behind this scandal. We had the Minister of Finance and other top boys within the August Assembly. They all sat together, looked at different ways of how they were going to execute the plan in 2 to 3 hours, because the sitting was going to happen. Next slide, please. It was well orchestrated and everything was done online. Communication was sent in WhatsApps. Dear committee members, where are you? Can we meet in the next 1 minute? Where are you? As opposed to officially writing out emails. Now, when I did this investigation, it was so complex because it required a lot of things, right? It required document review. It required, secret cameras, access to CCTV cameras. It required understanding parliamentary language. It required a lot. It was big. It was a big scandal, and it required a lot of investigations to do. Next slide, please. Again, I had to look at the reports that were, the budget that was approved, and then this that they forged, and then I had to work backwards. It was like a 55-page report that I had to read to actually get the little detail. In there was detail that showed the whole plan of how they stole that money. Next slide, please. That guy you see, when I was interviewing him, I told him that him and the speaker and other top government officials were stealing 10 billion. He threatened me. He told me, you either become a journalist or not. I'm going to come for you. You're not a politician. You cannot ruin my career. Hey. He made a lot of noise. He walked off set, removed off the mic and banged it down, pointed at me, told me, Wewe, don't play around. This is politics. I said, sit yourself down and answer my question. You orchestrated this deal. You actually approved money, 10 billion, and you stole it as Parliament. He was really mad. And the guy that you see there was actually the mastermind of that. That guy was the chairperson of the budget committee of Parliament. Everything rested on him. He was the maker or breaker. He went, fidgeted with the document. When he came on the floor, he said, Madam Speaker, I move to make an amendment. On the floor, amending a budget. On the floor, not at committee level. Moved in to say, I am amending the budget on the floor. And the speaker, because she was part of the orchestrated plan, chose people to second. They already had a deal behind the closed doors. Who is going to raise their hands to second the motion and everything. Everything sailed through smoothly. And Parliament allocated itself 10 billion shillings. Illegally. Quite a big corruption scandal. The guy right now is the Minister for Finance. Interesting. Yeah. And when we did this investigation, everyone, came on board, and there was the whole campaign started, refund the 10 billion, refund the 10 billion. People went even to court. Next slide, please. But what I discovered while I was doing that investigation was what was shocking. When I was doing that investigation, I realized that the media too was compromised. the reporters who covered the parliament, or under the Parliamentary Press Association, the parliamentary reporters did not actually report the story of passing of that budget because it was controversial and there was a lot of noise being made on the floor. So I realized later on in the investigation that most of them were called and bribed. Now, for such a big story, because I went back and checked, saying, this issue happened on this day. I went to the big newspapers. The next day, nothing was published. The next day, nothing was published. The other day, they put out a small 3 paragraphs brief somewhere in there. Now, for the station I worked for, when I was looking for the footage was deleted from the server. So I'm like, how come the folder of this footage the day before was there, and the day after was there? No, on the real day it's not there, but the day after it was there. So I started asking, where is this footage? I asked the parliamentary reporters, where is this footage? I need it. They said it's beyond us. Go and contact the boss. So I went and contacted the boss. Did you authorize this footage to go out? Did it keep in there? Like, that is beyond your pay grade. And I told them, whatever I find in this investigation, I'm going to put it out, including naming and shaming people who are involved in covering this up. Cut the long story short, my story too, the way I had done it and packaged it, because I'm also a news anchor. When I was reading the story and I took back a step and watched my stories, I love watching my stories, but they had cut out a whole chunk of the story. And I'm like, that is not the story I put in the can. I'm able to talk about it now because, I left and I was mad. It's like, so you used 30 minutes when I was doing the first segment to cut out a whole chunk to actually pile it chap and export it and throw it in the can. And we aired a documentary, an investigation, which was pieces missing. Next slide. So, again, I needed a lot of collaboration. So I brought guys on board. I was working closely with some guys within the August Assembly itself. They leaked documents. They helped me interpret those documents. I brought on board a financial expert who understands and analyzes budgets and broke it down to the tiniest detail, the rules of procedure, how do they work. I teamed up with 3 trusted journalists who I actually told to sign a confidentiality agreement. Because otherwise, sometimes when you're collaborating with people, someone can sell you out. Especially on issues of corruption. They'll give you 100 million and you say, this person and the other person, here is the footage, sir. It's all given. Next slide, please. So, and I learned that while investigating corruption, the thing about using investigative journalism as a tool for fighting corruption is that the mere fact that the corrupt people know that you're watching is in itself a strong point. I remember every time I would go to the August Assembly, they would ask me, what do you want here? Go away. And if you're here, you must be investigating something. What is it? What is it? What are you looking into? So they started getting scared and getting feared. Every time people who are corrupt know that you're investigating them, that in itself helps in the fight. Technology too has supported the fight against corruption in Africa, and we'll talk about the social networking analysis later, the crowdsourcing, the data visualization. And there's always a community out there that would want to work together to support your investigations. I mean, within the community and the whole entire African continent, you can reach out to people who know and who have done that. Last slide. So again, the future of fighting corruption and indeed investigative journalism relies in collaboration. Sorry, I had prepared a short presentation on that.
Thank you so much, Solomon. I think you've heard from him how it is very difficult to investigate most of our policymakers here in Africa. And Solomon has talked about so many issues in terms of the way he had to go through a lot of issues, his story being undercut, compromised, a lot of bribing within the political reporters, and many, many, many other things that we'll continue discussing as we move on. Now we get to our brother here, Dominic Wabala, who is from the Crime Association of Kenya, and he's also a veteran journalist, especially reporting on crime. Dominic, tell us something about how challenging it is to report corruption here in Kenya.
That is the most challenging question, because it is challenging. I've done investigative journalism for quite some time, maybe about 20 years or so, and I think Kenya and Africa is one of the most difficult places you can ever aspire to do investigative journalism, because unlike other regions where seemingly everybody encourages you to investigate and expose corruption, in Africa you're actually limited to do that. Especially in the East African region, you are limited to do that. There are so many ways in which, including your bosses, try to intimidate you and stop you from investigating. I've lost a job because of that. Once, one of the examples I'll give, there was supposedly smuggling of almost 800 kilograms of gold, supposedly from DRC. Now somebody walks into the office, a victim walks into the office and says, hey, this is what has happened to me. And then the news editor throws it to me and tells me, hey, that is your department, you cover that story. So I sit down with these guys and they narrate the story to me, and it doesn't make sense. So I ask them whether they have reported to the police, to the CID, and they tell me no. So I call a CID officer, a senior CID officer, and tell them, hey, I have this story and this is what they are saying. So can you please get their report before I start putting it in pen and paper? So the guy took the story, listened to these guys. It turns out that it was actually a fraud, because the documents they had were supposedly from a mining company in DRC, and they had 800 kilograms of gold. When Kabila heard of that, he flew into Kenya to try and find out who is this who has 800 kilograms of gold. For him, he sees this is as a potential rebel group that is trying to buy arms, using the gold to buy arms. So he flies in. I am pursuing this story, and in between the story, a colleague of mine calls me and tells me, I have somebody who wants to meet you. So I tell him, okay, if he wants to meet him, let him come to the office. And he says, no, he wants to meet you out of the office. Somebody calls me and tells me, don't take money from somebody you don't know. I'm like, why am I taking money from anybody I don't know? So the guys, I pursue the story. It is reported. I pick up the documentation and everything. I liaise with the DRC government. I find out that the supposed company is non-existent. So I start writing my stories. That first, there is no 800 kilograms of gold. 2, that the company does not exist. 3, that the actors are not actually known by the names they are acting in. So I expose that story, and I publish the first story on the back page of the Sunday Nation. Then this colleague again comes back to me and says, hey, but now these guys are insisting that they want to meet you. You are tripping on their area. I decline. I said, if they want to meet me, let them come to the office. It never happened. I wrote the second story, and then I was called and told I was performing at 20% of my capacity. And remember that they had done an appraisal, and I had been given 3 months, a bonus of 3 months salary 2 weeks before. So it didn't make sense that 2 weeks earlier, I had been given actually 3 months salary as bonus. And then now I'm being told I'm performing at 20%. So I said, okay, fine. You have already made your decision. I signed the exit letter and walked out. I went into hibernation for about 2 months. During those 2 months, somebody looks for me from Belgium. It It was called IPI, Institute of Peace, International Peace Institute. They look for me. And they want me, they have been following the story I was doing, and they're actually following gold, blood and gold diamonds, what is sourced from DRC and the likes of it. And they're interested in the story because they know where I was headed. So they convinced me to write for them and give everything that I have. I was a bit reluctant, but they sent 2 people into Nairobi from Brussels. They came, I did the story, gave them the documents. Of course, they paid me for that because I had been sacked for it anyway. So I was paid for that. And interestingly, 3 weeks later, the story that got me sacked was actually published by the people who sacked me. So that is how difficult, how challenging it is for you as an investigative journalist to chase a story. And the misfortune is that the corruption fights back, and it fights back viciously. So it will come back for you. Now, another incident I had of reporting corruption and corruption fighting back was there is a company called Kenya Pipeline Company. It is in charge of the fiber optic in this country. It is in charge of disbursing fuel all over the country, receiving and disbursing fuel all over the country, and including into the region. When Uganda wants fuel, it gets it from Eldoret and gets it from Kisumu and goes to that. But very interestingly, they are coming to Uganda. They are the ones who are going to manage your oil depot in Entebbe. So I get this story that there is a welder, a semi-literate welder, who manages every tender in that company. So I say, okay, fine, let me find out what specialty this semi-literate welder has. I do an investigation. I establish that he's a semi-literate. He has got approximately 11 companies that exclusively do business with the Kenya Pipeline Company. And it was something to do with the pipeline that gets the fuel from Mombasa to Nairobi. And this gentleman has the expertise of knowing when, because he's an insider, of knowing when a particular spare part is required and the specifications, because he's part of the people who deal with it. So he has formed companies, registered them in his nieces and his niece's wife's names and all those, in non-existent offices, non-existent addresses, and all that. And they claim to get the goods from Canada, but in actual sense, the goods are coming from China. So of course they are cheaper and of poor quality than they are supposed to be from Canada. They are also supposed to do some fueling pumps at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. They get all those things from China, but bill the company as if they've come from Canada, and that is in billions of Kenya shillings. So I look at these documents. First of all, I do my groundwork. I find the bank account, Citibank bank accounts of that company. The company, it was called, I can't remember the name, but they were doing business with Claval in Canada. I found those details. Then I start following the money. I retrace back until Canada. I get in touch with Canada. And a researcher I found in Canada tells me, contacts the Canadian company, and they say they have never done business with these guys. So I write to that company. They equally verify that they've never done that. I write my first story. My second story, I get in touch with the company to do a follow-up. The chairman of the company, who has now been appointed the guy in charge of almost everything every parastatal dealing with energy. It's called ICDC or something like that. They're actually the ones who are reviewing the fuel prices. After the outcry, they are the ones who are doing the fuel prices, the review of the fuel prices currently. He calls me and tells me, threatens me actually, tells me my boss is his friend. So he's going to talk to my boss to tell him that I am infringing on his freedoms. And I tell him, yeah, your friend is the one who employed me to do the job that I am doing. True to his threats, I'm told to send the questions that I want him to answer to the boss, who will send them to him. No, I insist. I said, no, let me just send the documents, the questions to him. I send them. His PR team and everybody paraphrase everything that every question that I'd sent to him, and it is actually the answers are sent to him, to my boss. It is done a question and answer, PR question and answer, and I end up having praised the fella. Now, those are the kinds of challenges that you get when you are investigating crime, investigating corruption. And like I said, corruption in this country, in the region, fights back, and it fights back viciously. If they can't compromise you, then they will compromise your next boss. Because if the subject offers you 10 million Kenya shillings and you don't accept it, your boss will be given 5 million or 2 million, and they will not publish the story. And those are the challenges that those of us who do investigative journalism actually go through day in, day out. At some point of time, when I was working when I was initially working for The Nation, we had the best investigative journalism desk in the region, East and Central Africa. We had they picked up all good investigative journalists around the country, and we were put on one desk, about 7 of us. David Okwemba, me, Andrew Teye, Mildred Ngesa, quite a number of us were put on the same desk. Mburu Mwangi, Kamau Ngodho, all of us were on the same desk. When we started investigating what is known as Anglo leasing in Kenya, you would write a story. And then those who have operated in the newsroom know that when you write a story, you write it on your machine, and then you release it to the general pool, where now the editor looks at, your immediate editor looks at, and then the next person who's the final proofreading editors look at before it's placed on page. Immediately you release the story, the subject calls you and tells you, man, why are you writing about me? And you are my friend. Why are you writing about me? Then you pull back the story and remove your byline and release it. He calls you back and says, now you have removed your byline. Now that corruption has crept in, including until the newsroom. So it is very challenging. One time I wrote a story when I was at the Standard, and less than 15 minutes, I had hardly walked for 200 meters. And this guy calls me and tells me, now you have written about me. I called back the editor and told them, please don't carry that story, because the subject already knows that it's me who has written the story. I'm already exposed. He says, no, we will. He says, no, the subject tells me, in fact, there is somebody here who has come to collect 500,000 Kenya shillings, and he has brought me the copy of the story. And actually reads the real story that I have done, word by word, that I have done. Now, if investigative journalism is not a challenge based on my explanation and Solomon's explanation, then I don't know what is not challenging. Because those are some of the challenges that we go through. And the misfortune is that most of the subjects that we write on, those involved in corruption in this region, have interests in those media houses. So other than the commercial interests that also that also determine what kind of story will be carried, that the ownership of media organizations too has that potential of killing your story. And it is the reason that more often than not, you will find that somebody has an investigative story, very good piece, but they're not willing to go along with it because one way or another, either they'll be victimized, somebody else is going to make money out of his investigation. And in the investigative desk and the crime and incidents desk are the desks that the newsrooms depend on, because the routine docketed stories are everybody's stories. You know, every other person has that story. Investigative stories are the stories that, you know, revealing something that somebody doesn't want revealed. And those are the stories that actually capture audience wherever it is, apart from, of course, public interest stories, which investigative stories happen to be. So more often than not, when an investigative journalist gets into the newsroom, the temptation for being compromised is too high. And that too is a challenge, because currently Kenyan parents are taking their children to school. Now, I am an investigative journalist. I've got a very juicy, sexy piece of investigation that I've done over a period of 2-3 months, yeah, or half a year. It comes at this crucial time when I'm in need of school fees for my children. And I know that if I push this story, it is the editor who's going to use this to get school fees for his children. So it gives you that temptation. I'm being realistic. It gives you as a journalist, as the investigative person, that temptation to actually get compromised. So even being compromised is a challenge for an investigator. The temptation is just too high. If you have a need for 1 million shillings, and somebody is offering you 5 million shillings, and the news organization pays you 300 or 200,000 shillings per month, and this is a one of 5 million shillings, how long will it take you to make that 5 million? So it takes a lot of discipline, a lot of sense of wanting to do the right thing at the right time for you to be able to get involved in investigative journalism. It is not an easy thing. It's not as easy as reporting on sports or reporting in parliament, because these you have the chances of somebody wanting you not to expose what you have investigated and established are too high. The price is too prime. It takes a lot of conviction for you to push an investigative story to the end.
Thank you. A lot of issues have come out from Dominic, and as you've heard, there's a lot of sabotage, there's a lot of compromising, there's a lot just happens in terms of people sabotaging your story, leaking information to the sources, many things that investigative journalists face in Africa and, so to speak, the developing world. Now, integrity has come out big in terms of when you are reporting as an investigative journalist. There's a lot of temptation because most of our newsrooms, journalists are not paid well. Solomon, why is integrity important, and why should an investigative journalist stick and uphold to integrity?
While I was still working with NTV Uganda, I did an investigation called Taken and Never Returned. And it was exposing how lawyers were selling children online, each baby at about $35,000, through the loose law at that time, which is legal guardianship. And so we follow this kid who was adopted by an American family. They came in, the lawyer forged documents with the parents. They bribed the judges. They offered the legal guardianship and adoption. And so the kid goes, and the mother waits, and she calls and said, she said, I want my baby back. You said, he had just gone to get sponsorship. So I investigated that whole story for quite a time. But the story was then also implicating the then Attorney General, because one of his law firms was partly behind that mess. And I remember lawyers coming in the parking, and they had quite a lot of money, at about 100 million. And so they told me, here is the money, bring us the footage, and say bye-bye to poverty. Because as a young journalist at that time, 100 million was a dream. I was like, whoa. So I thought, I'm like, these guys, I hope they don't, if I refuse the money, I hope they don't just kill me. But at the end of it all, I at the end of it, what will this mean for my integrity as a journalist? Journalists, it's a sacred calling, You will never live past that guilt that you investigated a story and you were bribed and you left the story to die, you'll never forgive yourself. This is why it is important to put up a system or a mechanism that can fight corruption even in the newsroom. Who else knows about you? This is where collaboration is very important. You're working on a piece, 4 people, 3 people, let's say, plus an editor. I mean, how do you corrupt everyone? Or maybe if it's really, you corrupt the editor, you corrupt the 3 guys and say, guys, it's literally difficult and impossible for you to corrupt all of them. One of them may speak out and blow your cover. What happens if the person who has bribed you was recording you? And the next day, they release your video, you receiving 100 million. What will that mean to the journalism fraternity? Because you're a credible journalist. And this actually, they don't, of course, they teach us in journalism school. But at the end of the day, it's that person. It's that person who is going to say yes or no to it. But you have to defend journalism. Because ultimately, if a story goes out there and that you were bribed, then, imagine, you are bribed and you are everywhere. Solomon, oh my goodness, I don't even want to complete that statement. How do you be on the front page that you're bribed and everyone knows you? Everything you've worked for your entire life, your career, everything is gone because of that. So investigative journalists, especially that are reporting on corruption, have been bribed so many times, and some of them have given in. But there are some others that have stayed loyal to their core. It's difficult, it's testing when your child is waiting for school fees, like my senior colleague was saying. And that argument that, if I don't take this money, the editor is actually going to take it and kill the story and go back and forth. It's something that, it's just a personal decision, Mary. So I think that all of us have a moral obligation to community and to society to do these investigations in public interest. I come from a space that investigative journalism is in public interest. Think about how many people, for example, in this investigation, in fact, the impact of that story is that they amended the Children's Act. The Children's Act was amended, and it's now very difficult for you to adopt a Ugandan child or even disguise it under legal guardianship. Because of just that one story, it started a national conversation, and they moved to amend the Children's Act. For generations to come, if you ask me what is the epitome of your journalism career, it was that. The fact that I did an investigation, the fact that I turned down 100 million shillings, and the fact that that story contributed to change and had impact, that up to now, that story still remains alive, and it went down to the record that I made a contribution to my community and indeed to my country.
Wow, wow, thank you. That reminds me of a story I just read today in the papers. A serial killer here in Kenya called Wabala has just escaped in the police cells. Dominic, in regard to upholding integrity and what corruption from the journalist side can do to humanity, kindly talk about that in a few minutes.
I mean, I always say that your name lives beyond you. And I look at it this way, that if I got compromised, for instance, today by this subject, the next day I will be bribed by this other subject, then subsequently by another, and they have a network. So each and everyone will say, you know, Dominic is easy to work with. So they too will compromise you. Now, who will you write about? Because each and everyone has compromised you. So then you'll have you'll have no capacity to investigate and write about anything. At the end of the day, you'll become redundant because you'll be of no use to your organization, assuming that you're working for a news organization.
They can even expose you.
Exactly.
Yourself.
They can even expose you. There's a case we were just dealing with the other day of where a journalist went and demanded, was writing a story and demanded some money, 500,000 Kenya shillings from a subject, and they were recorded. But they did not. The subject did not give the money. So they went to back to the newsroom and wrote the story. But they used a boss's name to demand for that money. That have been sent by this boss. If you don't give me this money, I'm going to write this story. And true to it, they wrote the story. So the subject who had been recording what this guy said was very furious and called the editor and started ranting and abusing the editor and all. And the editor does not know what this guy is talking about. So they said, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Then she said, I even have a recording. So she was invited to the office and played the recording. And the guy just lost his job that way. Now, was that amount worth, one, their name and their job? Was it worth? I mean, those are some of the questions that you need to be asking yourself in the event that that comes to you. Integrity gives you a name that will keep you needed, will keep people trusting in what you do, than that short-time gratification of some few thousands, millions of shillings. So integrity is all about yourself. It's all about your upbringing. It's all about what you think, the values that you consider good. If you think, I mean, there's nothing much you can say about integrity. Integrity is just integrity. It's putting yourself in good standing in the public eye.
Thank you.
And that is what people need to have.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you, Dominic. Solomon, something to do with transnational corruption and also illegal trade. Do you have anything you can talk about?
So, the number of, these days, trans-border crime going on, and, you know, trans-border corruption scandals happening. I just heard that that organization, the Kenya Pipeline, is coming to Uganda to manage our
Your oil, yeah. You want to do, Uganda, I think Museveni wants to do, is doing barges. They have already done barges for getting the oil from Kisumu to Entebbe. Those oil storage places. You have 4 barges, and some Indian company has done very good storage tanks for you. So there is talk of being assisted to run that facility because of the experience on this side and the lack of experience on the other side. there is that is coming up.
Cecilia and Ronald have been noting this, and I think this goes to speak about the power of collaboration. I mean, Dominic is here, and this is exactly living the moment that there is number of corruption-related scandals that cross the border within the community, and the power of collaboration cannot be overemphasized. We currently are working on a project called Poisoning Lake Victoria, and how corrupt factories and industries are actually pouring dangerous chemicals into Lake Victoria, how we find fish floating on either sides of the lake, and who is involved. And some of these companies have cross-border issues. I think this is where collaboration is very important, that an investigative journalist need to understand that when you collaborate with other people, it comes along with so many things. It comes along with resources, it comes along with, stronger teams, with more ideas, with more, if you don't have secret filming, the other person can have a secret camera. If you don't have equipment, they can help you with that. If your budget is too big, you can, all of you can, contribute to the budget, and together you put out a big investigation that actually goes to change history. There are people who, for example, are good with open source data and, social analytics. And you're not good at that. Maybe you just know how to do stories. There are people who know how to do financial investigations, and they go and pull out a company whose name, for example, was registered. And, we just came back from Dubai, the Dubai Expo. Please go to the Kenyan Investments Authority and get the list of the companies that intended to actually invest in Kenya, and just do a background search on them. Uganda just did one recently, and there's a company that was registered in 2019, and it all filed for bankruptcy back home, and they just want to come and invest in Uganda. And so, like the power of collaboration, the power of working together with, especially within the East African community, but even beyond, right? You may find a company that is happening or that is doing work in South Africa, and they're also doing the same work in Uganda, and you can't fly to South Africa. Reach out to an investigative journalist out there and work with them on this story, and then publish it in a more stronger way. And you'll both take the credit. Some people are so mean with their bylines. They want to only be the only people who are, this investigation is done by Solomon Serwanja. I think those days are gone. I think that you cannot do investigative journalism anymore alone. The power of collaboration is the way to go.
Thank you, Solomon. And Dominic, in regard to the power of collaborations, this issue is coming up strongly in investigative journalism. How has collaborations and technology helped your work in crime reporting?
Collaboration is the way to go, like my colleague Solomon has said. The world is a village now, and based on the technologies that we're having now, including corruption, is traversing regions. So you can't, you as an investigative journalism cannot purport to investigate something when the networks of crime are actually international. You'll only limit yourself to your country. So collaborations are very essential when you want to do a successful, impactful investigation, in investigative reporting. It is of essence that you as a journalist think of collaborating in an environment like this. Make an effort of getting contacts of the people that you have at your disposal to make it easier for you to do that. And with the technologies like big data, like data mining and forensic tools and all that, you'll be able to correlate the information that you have. A registration number of a Kenyan vehicle in Uganda, if you just made an effort to find out who it belongs to, might give you a lead on what the guy is doing in Uganda. Yeah, and in Kenya, it takes me 500 shillings to go online and find out who the car belongs to.
Sure.
So those simple collaborations will actually make you help you gather information that will make you have a bigger story than if you went as an individual, though a Kenyan registration vehicle was just seen in Uganda. So for me, collaborations and technology comes in so many ways. The mobile applications that are coming in, there are so many tools, online tools, Invid, yeah, Klaxon, all those. If you combined to use those with collaborations with colleagues regionally, you will come up with very, very, very good stories. And for me, I think it's the way to go. Now, what we are noticing is that even our newsrooms are limited in as far as resources are concerned. Nation might have a bigger reach because it has branches in Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, and the likes of it. But what about the other newsroom media houses that you're working with? They might not have that capacity. So it will limit you in what you want to do. But with collaboration and making networks with your colleagues, it will be easier for you to actually go further and do impactful investigative stories.
Mary, can I just say something
Sure.
a little bit more about what Dominic was saying? At the African Institute for Investigative Journalism, we actually have a whole program called Collaborative Investigative Reporting. And what we want to do is we want to be the link, right? Just beyond this conference, beyond just talking about collaboration. We want to be the link to bring journalists together from Kenya, from wherever part of Africa, to work together on a joint project, right? We would love to see, newsrooms work, getting a reporter from Nation, from Standard, from Next Media Services, or New Vision, or the Daily Monitor, or the Observer, all of them coming together to pursue an investigation. And so for us, collaboration is very important. And I'm also excited about what Code for Africa is doing. Because, like I said, they are the tech guys. They are the data guys, right? They publish a lot of information and a lot of data out there onto their platform. But collaboration, because they know the data, they don't know the storytelling, right? They know how to write reports and actually put them on their website. So imagine how much we could do together if we collaborated with, tech giants or data giants like Code for Africa, DHR Lab, and all these other guys, the hackers, the guys who do good hacking. Collaboration shouldn't only stop within investigative journalists. It actually should extend to tech companies, to, the people who I had hacking for good, which is cool. I love the idea. Why don't you put those hackers together with guys from, Code for Africa and investigative journalists to study how the Kenyan social media trends are going and just expose those things that are happening ahead of the elections. I think that together we can do more. I cannot overemphasize the power of collaboration in pushing for investigative journalism in Africa.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Solomon and Dominic, for insightful responses towards investigative journalism in Africa and across the borders. My wonderful audience, we are running out of time, so I'll give you a few minutes to ask any questions for Dominic and Solomon.
Thank you for that insightful presentation. My question goes to Dominic. A few of us subscribe to your school of thought of being true to yourself. But I'm curious, how did you strategize after you'd lost that job? Because it's one thing to do a story, but then it's another to have this whole passion, but then your job is on the line. I mean, your integrity will not pay the bills. And I'm really coming from a good place because I'm one of the people that can't be compromised. But then when you're hard pressed with such a situation, how do you backtrack and then re-strategize to go to the next level? And then secondly, how are we able to overcome the bottlenecks while doing investigative stories? And this is specifically when you're reporting about something that you know an editor will block, or if you are in an organization where you know such content may not be published. How then do you save yourself?
One, I will share, I'll start answering your second question. One, I have this network of fellow journalists who, if I think my story will not be used by this editor, I'll simply pass it on. It's a complete thing anyway, so he won't have a lot of effort trying to, maybe all he will need to do is just to verify that information. That is it. Now, what makes me passionate about what I do and push for what I do, I imagine, supposing it's a pharmaceutical company that is corruptly getting in spurious or ineffective drugs, pharmaceutical drugs or something like that, and they're coming into the country. I'm looking at something like a painkiller, a Panadol or something like that, which if imported into a country will affect not just me, including my grandmother down in the village. They will get access to this. Now, when I am getting compromised, that is what I think about. So what happens when I am bribed to keep quiet? What will be the effect of whatever is coming in? Whether it is expired sugar, whether it is substandard medication or something, what will happen to, first of all, me and those people who depend on me? Because if they fall sick, the bill still comes to me. So even the bribe that I take will still be used to treat that, and I might use more than what I've earned in a bribe. So those are some of the things that actually make you, passionate about what you want to do. Because at the end of the day, it's about you, it's about your conscience and the repercussions of your actions. If you think about that, then chances are you will not be compromised. But if you don't think about that and just think about amassing, and then for how long will you be, if for instance, it is known that you are compromised, that Dominic is compromised, so how many people will trust me? Which other media house will want to touch me? None. Assuming, for instance, now I do my work as a consultant. I write for whoever wants me to write for them, whoever commissions me to write for them. Currently, I'm commissioned by Nation to write for them. Now, if I didn't have the integrity, do you think they would want to work with me? My name is already soiled. So for in as far as it's concerned, my journalism career is gone just for a one-time bribe. That is how I look at myself and think about what I do when I'm doing what I'm doing.
When you lost that job, I'm not saying we are all going to go back and lose jobs because of stories, but in the case of
in my case, of course, I had the 3 months salary. I had the severance pay. Of course, when they sack you, there is that the in lieu of notice and all that, and what you have accumulated over the years as your retirement benefits and the likes of it. So I had quite a and even as I work, I always have a backup of what next. So I had planned myself way in advance. So at least I was able to cushion myself in as far as that until I got back my footing, which wasn't long. It was about 6 or so months, and then I was back into circulation again to do my thing. And I've since, and I think that has since helped me, because now everybody looks at you as a very, an honest person who does an honest thing, an honest living, and they tend to want to oscillate towards honesty. As much as the society is corrupt, but there's some people always tend to oscillate towards honesty.
Thank you, thank you. Solomon wanted to respond to that question.
No, I just want to top up on what Dominic was saying, and I think that there is a growing need for investigative journalism. There's a growing appetite for people. People are investing in investigative reporting. That's why you see grants and calls everywhere. The world has realized that investigative journalism plays a very critical role. This is why they're investing money. The calls are out there. You want to work on an investigation? Go out there and apply for that grant. Go and compete. And you don't even have to be in the newsroom. You know, you can just say, I'm a freelance journalist, and you apply for that grant. You will go out, get that grant, and go out and investigate and do your stories. The number of organizations that are reaching out to support investigative journalists as well. But also I think, you know, when I heard you say that, something dropped in my mind in terms of the financial shocks. How do we shock absorb ourselves as investigative journalists from what perhaps happened to Dominic? Because what would happen after 6 months when he has depleted his accounts? I think that's a conversation we need to start thinking about. Investing as investigative journalists, having a side hustle that will support you even, you know, when you're out of the newsroom. I think it's a conversation that we need to have as well. Having heard from Dominic, what else can you do to actually keep you financially
Oh,
afloat?
thank you. We will only have one question. Our panelists will be around. You can engage them as we take something, I think. So, Caro, and I've seen one hand, stick to 30 seconds, 30 seconds so that we come to a close.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I'll probably forward the question to Dominic and ask him about the ability of journalists when they are doing investigative stories, and this has come from a recent mentorship program that we're doing with Media Council, and people do not, or rather journalists do not seem to understand policies and governance in terms of issues they're investigating, and especially business stories. I'll give you an example. When we had KEMSA scandal last year under NTV, you know, people began to doubt the story by Dennis Sukari because there are two things he didn't be able to elaborate. One, the procurement and IFMI system. How do people steal on that? That wasn't very clear. And then he had an expert who, at one point in time, people started now watering down who the expert was. So how do you ensure that when you're reporting investigative issues, you're very much aware of the policies that govern such things?
I have another one. Just to ask, sorry. And how do you ensure integrity amongst journalists in the newsrooms? Like your colleagues whom you're working with, how do we protect ourselves from each other, from being cannibalistic? Because I've seen you selling, I've seen a story that you've done and then I sell it to somebody. How do you protect each other and have trust amongst your colleagues?
Dominic, maybe you can take the integrity, and then Solomon, you can talk on the policy issue. Yeah.
So Solomon goes for it.
I think that story, the question that came in on the policy
On the
bit
policy.
came from her, and you understand the Kenyan terrain better.
Oh.
So maybe I'll take on the integrity
Oh,
one.
sure. That's
As an investigative journalist, you need to be widely read. Now, investigative journalism is not all about a one-off story. You know, for me, I didn't touch in KEMSA because I thought KEMSA was a mobbed story. So you couldn't get the best out of KEMSA. KEMSA was, for Solomon's benefit, KEMSA is equivalent to your parliament story on COVID response, COVID money. When Kenya started doing that, KEMSA is the Kenya Medical Supply Agency that buys medical supplies for the whole country to be distributed to hospitals. Now, when that started, in Kenya there is an Oracle-based system called IFMIS, IFMIS, I can't, IFMIS is integrated financial management something system that we deal with, that every procurement process of the government passes through. So if you place a bid, or if you did a bid and then you won, and the subsequent processes have to pass through that. If you deliver, or if you are appointed to be the one to supply that a particular good, it is tagged on Solomon, and the process until the end, until when you are paid. So it actually fact checks every process that you go through. Now, for an investigative journalist, I believe you must be able to have known the processes from A to. If any journalist asks questions, ignorant questions based on that, then that is not an investigative journalist. That is just a common journalist, because you need to be well versed with what you are doing to be able to ask those questions. For you to have that tag of an investigative journalism is somebody who's supposed to be well informed, because yours is just not is just not a story of, you know, a knee-jerk story. Yeah, yours is a well researched story. So for that, you must be able to understand the policies that are linked to whatever you are writing about, the laws that are related to that. Like, for instance, we have a law, and I believe Uganda also has ratified that law of access to information, yeah, where you can make a request to any organization, so long as it is it receives taxpayers' funds, that you can make a requisition of information from that organization, and you are entitled to it. Now, the misfortune is as much as we have ratified that law in Kenya, the problem is that they might delay the process. You know, it might take you 2 years to get that information. And maybe it's not of help to you at that time. But if you are aware of what you're looking for and what you're looking for, you'll be able to get that. For instance, in Kenya now, you can go onto the system, pay 500 shillings. Kenya is obsessed with 500, Bob. Go to 500, the Kenyan government, the e-government system. Go online to the National Transport Safety Authority and log in, pay through M-Pesa, pay in, and find out the owner of this vehicle. You can go onto the register of companies, pay through M-Pesa, and it will actually give you details of a company, what they call CR12. It will give you all the details of who this person is, who owns this company, when it was registered, who are the directors, what percentage of shares do they have, and all that. Now, it's for an investigative journalist, first of all, you must have done that background to be able to give that information. But when somebody walks into, and sometimes I'm ashamed when I'm somewhere, I'm following up something, maybe I've gone to a press conference as a follow-up, what is happening, and somebody walks into a newsroom, and in the newsroom they had that brief, that, hey, Solomon Serwanga, the executive director of Africa Investigative Journalists, is going to talk about ABCD. And then after Solomon has talked and done everything, and then a journalist asks, sir, what is your name? But when they left the newsroom, they had already been briefed and told, this is what you're going to do, and this is who you're going to talk to, and this is what they are talking about. Ask follow-up questions. Now, that is the failure that we have. But, madam, as I was saying, if you are an investigative journalist, that is something that you are supposed to have researched, known the pros and cons of whatever question that you will ask, to get to be an effective communicator of what you'll have got from that person. I hope I have answered your question.
Yeah, so how do we protect against our own? First of all, I think that it depends on the story you're working on. There are some stories that are very sensitive and that you can only trust it with your editor. Only 2 people. So that if anyone leaks the story, then you know it's either you or the editor. There are some of those stories that are very sensitive that you just cannot give away to anyone. right? The other bit is to have personal servers. Don't put your investigations work onto the general server. Someone will come and delete that folder. You know, if you have your secret filming done, your different investigations that you've done, when you come back from the field, sorry, I have a bias to broadcast and TV, and then you put things on the server, and anyone can access that server. I think that there is a need for the investigations desk to have its own space, both online and in the office. And then don't try as much as you can to keep your circle very, very tight. Very, very tight. I can give you an example. Think of Anas Aremia or Anas, celebrated investigative journalist. The brother has 1 million bounty for his head. Right? Think about that. Anas has continued to do investigations. He has produced quite many during the COVID-19 pandemic, Quack Doctors, we all watched that, and others. Anas is bidded, right? Imagine if just one of them gave him away. I know Anas without a mask. I've met him, he's my friend. But I'm just imagining that because there's a bounty on his head, a 1 million naira bounty or Ghanaian money for his head, and that bounty came when he did that betraying the game was there, but then there's one when he was exposing judges, you know. Yeah. That annoyed judges. So many judges resigned, others were prosecuted, and they put a bounty on Anas's head. Now he works with the Tiger Eye, and he has his team that he works with, and he tells you that he has been, investigative journalism is not for the faint-hearted, it's for the brave. But he continues to do these investigations, right? And so that goes to speak to who do you trust when you're doing that investigation? Who do you expose this story with, right? Is there a way you can actually just try to minimize how many people are in that circle? And can you actually trust them? Because investigations can lead to people's lives to be lost. Someone will give you away that you're investigating the president, and they will come and assassinate you. Big corruption scandals which have involved big names. People's lives are on the lines, like people's careers. You expose maybe the Bank of Kenya governor. My friend, they'll assassinate you. So how do you protect yourself? Also, and it's important that you brought this issue up of safety and how do we protect each other. When do you hide your byline? When do you decide to go under the bids? When is your byline putting you at, let me tell you, that's one of the challenges I've had with my journalism career, investigative journalism career. There's some stories that are very sensitive that you think when you put your byline or your face to it, you're done. Yeah. It's either you let it go, you get someone like Maria from Kenya to voice the script and just do the story and put it out there. People don't know who Maria is. People cannot trace it back to you. But then part of me thinks, I have toiled doing this investigation. I have worked hard. I have done secret filming. I have, done everything. I have scripted. I have done all these things. Clearly, should I give my hard work away and give Maria to actually own this byline or to own this story? So where do we draw that line between owning the byline and our safety? I leave that to you.
Sure.
But just to add on what he's saying, there are tools, there are things that as an investigative journalist you can do. You can actually work on a computer, but not leave your footprint on that machine. there are tools to do that. You can, more often than not, in all the investigative journalism desks I've been, you don't sit on the common new general desk. You have your own area. If you have a meeting, it is exclusively for you. If you're working on a sensitive story that even you don't want your colleagues to know about because of that fear of the leak, you just brief your immediate boss and tell them, I'm working on this, I'll be out for this long, and this is what will happen. Sometimes it does that when you do that when you're doing sensitive investigations. Like I was doing some gun running investigations all the way from Eastern Europe through the Middle East to Africa. The guns that the Karamojos and the Turkanas and the likes of it are using. And I did it with some Canadian whatevers. Nobody knew about it. We did the story. It was published. Nobody even knows I was part of the story. But at least when you go to the larger production, there is a mention that you are in it. But locally, nobody knows that you did that story. Like someone says, there is that fight, there is that compassion that I've put in so much energy and everything else, and it is me, it is mine. But like they say, there's no story worth your life. There are things that of interest is what impact has it? Has it influenced policy change? Has it influenced some action to be taken? Now, if that happens, then I'm satisfied. I'm okay. Even if it doesn't carry my byline, but I'm okay for the sake of the society. If my investigative story brings change and desired change, that is all it takes for me.
Thank you.
There are mixed reactions on that.
30 seconds. Oh, from the audience.
Yeah. I mean, everyone has mixed reactions on that.
Oh my, we are short of time, and I think you can engage our able panelists later as we take some tea. Thank you so much, Solomon, for your wonderful insights. Thank you, Dominic, and thank you to our wonderful audience, both online and physical. Thank you so much. We are bringing this to a close. Thank you to Code for Africa and the WITS University. Kwaheri. Thank you.